Can you say hard hats, folks? Hard hats, lunch pails, steel-toe boots?
Anything short of a championship this year is a failure.
Look at this boomer right here.
You've just got so much talent here.
Somebody said we need to apologize for Jalen.
Can I quote the John? What are we apologizing for? What did we say? What did we do?
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the Garden Report. Adam Aaronson here from Philly Voice. We're going to talk more about this Christmas game. We had a bit of an abbreviated show yesterday after the game. And still a ton, I think, to take away from this one for both teams here. And this is the first time that the Celtics saw the Sixers and vice versa here, Adam. Ton has happened leading up to this game. Celtics, as expected, got off to one of the best starts in the league. Slipping up a little bit recently, and as for the Sixers, probably the most surprisingly poor start to this season, and they've turned it around a little bit here with some renewed health. 3 or 4 games now into that big three playing together, and I guess aside from Paul George, this is what you expected to see this year. This is what I certainly expected to see from this year. I had them second to Boston in the East coming into this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is, when I posted my game story after the game, I said, this is what the vision was. This is what this team was supposed to look like, really, like you said, aside from Paul George, who's still in a little bit of a funk as a scorer and really has done everything better than I expected this year, other than shooting and scoring, where he's lagged quite a bit behind his career marks. And, we could talk about later if he'll catch up. But yeah, the funniest part to me is, we spent in Philly like 2-3 months talking about this Maxey, Oubre, George, Caleb Martin, Embiid lineup that was supposed to be their starting 5. It was Maxey and Embiid and a bunch of wings, which is what everybody here has believed the formula would be. You add another high-level scorer in George. You have 2 guys who can guard across the positional spectrum, who can knock down an open 3. Everybody knows what Caleb Martin has done in matchups in Boston in the past. And this was actually the first time that those guys all started a game together on Christmas Day. They had all been available the last few games, but KJ Martin had been starting over Caleb Martin. KJ Martin's now out for at least a few weeks with a stress reaction in his foot. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, this is what it was supposed to look like. And the fact that we're finally getting a glimpse of what all of this was supposed to look like on Christmas, when the season starts more than 2 months earlier than that, is probably not a great sign for the Sixers. But they can't go in a time machine and get Embiid's knee ready for opening night. They can't prevent Paul George from having 2 bone bruises. They can't prevent Maxey from having the hamstring issue he had in November. All they can do is make the best of the situation they're in, and that's what they did yesterday.
Yeah, and you recounted a lot of it right there, everything that's gone wrong. Yeah, you certainly had the Joel Embiid locker room incident, suspension as well, and this game not without incident either, with Embiid spilling into the crowd before the game and hurting his ankle, which I'm not normally on the floor much before the game. I usually poke my head out a few times. If I got to talk to someone, I will. But that's always what I imagine missing when I'm not out there, is something like that. Of course, it never happens. Yeah. But this game, I'm not out there, and that happened. And I think Jared Weiss was the only one who caught it. He turned his ankle on the security guard, fading away on a 3. And that's the kind of season it's been for the Sixers team. And even with this great win, you look at something like that, and he, I think, turned the other ankle later in the game. So even as you get the starting lineup together and you get this great win, you still have that sense here that this is the season from hell where everything goes wrong.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, everything has. I would say one thing has gone right from the start, which has been Guerschon Yabusele, who I'm sure we'll get to, which is just an incredible story. The other one was that Jared McCain looked like he was going to win Rookie of the Year,
right?
And had this just ridiculous start to his rookie season. He had, I think, an 8 or 9 game stretch of straight games with 20+ points, all efficiently, all within the flow of the offense, like as the focal point of an undermanned offense. And then on the 13th, they're playing Indiana. He takes a brutal fall and hits the back of his head on the floor. They check him for a concussion. Somehow he didn't have one. They bring him back into the game. And then the next morning, we find out he didn't have a concussion, but somehow he tore his meniscus. There had been no understanding that anything was wrong with Jared's knee, and suddenly it's a repaired meniscus. He's going to be out for quite a while. Still unclear if he's going to be back at all this year. Embiid has still only played in, I want to say, 9 games. Paul George has had 2 extended absences, both with the same injury, a left knee hyperextension, which was later revealed to be a bone bruise. Tyrese Maxey was having, the season from hell as a shooter, and he's one of the better shooters there is in the league. And just when he was starting to get on track, he hurt his hamstring, comes back. Everybody's in and out of the lineup constantly. Caleb Martin had been having, the worst offensive season imaginable, had been playing through several injuries at once. They finally decided to sit him down, give him some time off, and Nick Nurse was adamant that when he got back, they were confident that he'd be more like the guy that the Sixers thought they were getting. They gave him a 4-year deal. And hoped that he would be either a starter or, one of their most critical, rotation wings. And Caleb Martin, I think Derek Bodner from All City tweeted that Caleb Martin has upped his 3-point percentage on the season by 9% over the last 2 games. 3 for 4 against San Antonio on Monday, and obviously 7 for 9 yesterday in Boston. So, again, this is sort of the essence of the Sixers, and it has been for as long as I've either covered them or followed them in any capacity, is they do enough to make you think that, whatever their expectations are, whatever their dreams are not going to be accomplished. And just when you're ready to write them off, they have a game like they did yesterday. And you're like, well, if it can look like this, if they can beat a team as good as the Celtics on Christmas in front of everybody, why can't they do that in April or May? And, there are many reasons why that probably is not something that at least this iteration of the team is going to do against the current iteration of the Celtics. But it's just the constant state of the Sixers is if just when you think you're out, they do something that makes you want to come back in on them. And then just when you're ready to get excited about them, something devastating happens. It is just, that is just how it always is with this team. And I've learned to just go with the flow of it, I guess.
Yeah, and I do like how the team's constructed. You look at all the moves from over the offseason. That's why I had such high hopes for them. And I guess I underrated, and maybe many people who like them underrated, the fact that you're turning over so much of the roster here. And I still remember when they came to bus in the preseason, just how flustered Nick Nurse sounded before the game about who was in, who was out, how they're going to use people. And that's pretty much how he sounded the whole way, because between the injuries and that turnover and just some of the general dysfunction there, it's been a bit of a mess. So I guess they're fortunate to now, after this win here in 7 of their last 10, be a game out of that 10 spot, 9 spot when you include the Bulls in that. So they're on the doorstep of the postseason picture now. They obviously have plenty of time here to climb up this if they can get close to full health. And obviously McCain's not going to be part of that picture now here. But they have a lot of good pieces here. And I think when you look at Embiid, people are going to feel how they feel about him being the centerpiece of a championship team. I tend to think it's possible, if everything goes right around him, that he could be the centerpiece of something like that, though. As his health continues to deteriorate here, I think that's less and less the case. He's got to be healthy come postseason time, and that just hasn't happened. Feels like going back years now. I like the wings that they have, but is Paul George past the point in his career where you can rely on him to be, 1, consistently healthy, and 2, consistently productive on the offensive end? So there's just so many questions, and you go all the way down the line here. I don't see them as a threat to the Celtics in a series. I do think, just because of Tyrese Maxey, and you saw it in this game, he's such a great matchup against them. And it's crazy because for a little while in his career, he wasn't. I thought he was such a target on defense. He fouled so much against the Celtics. I think they were the team that he fouled the second most times total against through the end of last year in his career. And his shooting was so unreliable that he didn't fare well in many of those matchups against the Celtics. But now, whether it's the Celtics changing their personnel a little bit here, a year older, less athletic top to bottom, he can beat a lot of these guys off the dribble, and that's all he did all game yesterday. So I guess if there's some semblance of health here and Maxey continues to grow and Nurse can scheme it up about as good as any coach, it's a series that I could see being extremely challenging, especially if it happens early. And obviously you can't rule out this being like a 1-8 or 2-7 kind of series the way it's gone for Philly.
Yeah, I mean, if the Sixers are to be involved in the playoffs post play-in, just based on where they are in the standings, I think by far the most likely scenario is that they're a team that wins a play-in game, and that puts them as a 7 or 8, which puts them against either Boston or Cleveland, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a very likely scenario, and I agree with you. I would not consider the Sixers right now to be a genuine threat to the Celtics in a 7-game series. If they can stay healthy for several months and build the cohesion that a team needs to, win at the highest levels. And because, like you said, entering the season, it was an issue of all these guys haven't played together. And that's something that sometimes you have to live with the first few weeks of a season. But when your best player, who your team is built around on both ends of the floor, doesn't play for the first few weeks of the season, it's everybody getting used to each other on the non-Embiid version of the team. And now everybody now has to get used to the Embiid version of the team. And then he goes out and you have to go back, and they're going back and forth. And that's the biggest thing. It's not just about Embiid. It's really difficult for everyone else because, I'll just say, for example, someone like Kelly Oubre, when Embiid is on the floor, Oubre can cut off of him, do a ton of stuff off the ball that's really useful, crash the offensive glass where he's been great this year, and like really focus on all of the little things, doing the dirty work. When Embiid is out, most of his minutes, he's the secondary creator and scoring option in a lineup, which is a role he's better at serving than anyone else on the team, really, other than Maxey and George, but is not a perfect role for him. So anyways, if, with all the obvious caveats of if they stay healthy, if they can, build cohesion with each other, like, I think they probably top out as a team that gives the Celtics a really, really difficult series with a bunch of close games that Boston wins. Now, obviously, if a great player on the Celtics turns his ankle, or, Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre have the best shooting series of their lives, which would be tough for Caleb Martin to do from what we know from the conference finals a few years ago. But of course, there are ways that games and series can swing in ways that aren't totally, a reflection of how good the teams are. But anyways, I generally agree with your sentiment. I'm far from ready to call the Sixers a sort of credible threat to the Celtics. I do think if the Celtics did play, let's say, the Celtics played the Sixers in either the 1-8 or the 2-7 in the first round, like, I do think that's something that would probably help the Celtics a lot to face like 3 legitimate star level players, one of which a former MVP, across the positional spectrum early on, in just a way of like, not that the Celtics need, any more battle testing, but like, it can never hurt, those sorts of things. I thought that was one reason I thought the Knicks were gonna, if they could stay healthy, like really sort of steamroll Indiana, was because you emerge from a series as contested as that Knicks Sixers series was. And I think you just come out for the better as long as you're healthy and you're not totally worn down. So yeah, I mean, I am far from ready to declare the Sixers as a threat to beat the Celtics, as a contender even against most teams, because again, like, we're having this conversation because Joel has played in 3 of their last 4 games, and that's been the pinnacle of their season so far, from both on-court performance and his availability. Everybody says it, but it's really all you can say is, you'll believe it when you see it with the Sixers, because they just haven't shown it enough. And if I told someone in October that they were going to beat the Celtics on Christmas Day in front of everybody the way that they did, and that it would improve their record to 11-17, like, that would be devastating to a lot of people. And all of this has been devastating, and a lot of people until yesterday were sort of checked out, and a lot of them still might be, and it's completely understandable, especially given how many disastrous things have happened with the Sixers team, from the Kawhi shot to the blowing up that team that everybody was fond of and bringing in Al Horford and that being a disaster, and then having to salary dump Horford, and then Horford goes back to Boston and is immediately awesome again, and then wins a title and kills the Sixers every time. I said battle tested before. Sixers fans are battle tested. They have really been through the ringer over the last however many years. But yeah, again, probably too soon to even speculate about what they can do in a playoff series, because like I said, that lineup that everybody anticipated Nick Nurse using on a night-to-night basis, he just used for the first time on Christmas. And there's a stat floating around about how the Sixers are undefeated when Embiid, Maxey, and George all start and finish the game. It's like, that's true, but it's also 3 games, so it's like not a significant sample size there. There are just too many moving parts with the Sixers to be able to project anything definitively in the months of April and May when we're still in December. But with the way that when they started out 3-14 or whatever it was, they're in a much better spot now, where, like you said, I believe they're half a game out of the play-in, and they're extremely lucky that the East has been as bad as it's been. And they've got a chance. They've got a chance because they, in almost every matchup they play, are going to have the best player on the floor, and in some of them they'll have the second best, and they'll have probably the fourth or fifth best too. And guys like Oubre and Caleb Martin and Yabusele are starting to figure out how they fit within the construct of this 3-star team. And not to go on too long of a tangent, but I think the biggest issue with the Sixers early in the season was that it's a team of 3 stars and then a bunch of players who are fit to play around multiple stars at once. But then it just turned into Maxey on his own. And so everybody gets notched up the pecking order in a spot where they're probably underqualified for. And then it's just a bunch of guys who can't exactly hold their weight for the roles that they had to carry. And so now guys are starting to settle in. They've, got a lot of guys, Oubre and Yabusele stand out specifically as guys who have talked about with us in the media about, the value of being able to settle into a role and know what's expected of you. And I think, that's pretty much the best version of the Sixers imaginable. And again, the best, close to the best version of the Sixers imaginable, won by 4 against the Celtics without Drew Holiday and without a half of Porzingis. This is not. They did not blow this team out by 30, and I don't say that to try to throw cold water on the whole thing, because Sixers fans are excited about this and they deserve to be, especially with how the season's gone. But again, this is my long-winded way of saying, don't jump the gun on this team being ready to compete at the highest level, because there have been many times under far better circumstances that people have jumped the gun on that, and it's come back to bite them.
Yeah, and in this game, Porzingis goes down, doesn't play the second half, no Holiday. So if you're on the Celtics side, those are caveats, along with only losing by 4, that you could hope turn the other way when they play again. And it's a tough matchup, especially if it does end up being a first-round matchup. It's more physically imposing. It's more burdensome in terms of games and the style of the series than you would want to play in a first-round series. But that could go the other way, like you mentioned, too, in terms of battle testing you. And everyone, I'm sure, remembers that 2022 Nets Celtics series that the Nets entered as favorites, and Kyrie and KD are on the other side. And some people arguing you want to maybe avoid that series, and the Celtics just ended up sweeping through them and set the tone for a finals run that year. So I don't worry too much about first round series that look scarier than they might appear, because, and I felt this way to some degree about the Sixers so far, they are who they are. And I know they're getting healthier, and I know things are starting to turn around a little bit here. But to some degree, this does feel just cursed, or maybe ill-conceived, or whatever it is that's preventing it from reaching its potential so far. I think could continue to lead to some inconsistency throughout the season. But, we got to see them all together before we start to figure out what it's going to be. And it was a pretty good first impression here. I want to give a quick shout out to PrizePicks. Weekend awaits still. Games on Saturday across football and Sunday. Plenty of basketball going on with the rest of the teams around the NBA back in action tonight. And the great Christmas slate that you had yesterday's passed, but still all kinds of opportunities to join 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. What is PrizePicks? Daily fantasy sports made accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. And you can still make the holidays bigger and brighter with PrizePicks. Again, 1,000 times your money possible over here, and it's the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states. Again, join the 10 million members and sign up today. They get the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. They put their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. So join now this holiday season. They're always giving away some great free picks. They had the free Jokic Square last night. And when you sign up with the code CLNS, you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need a win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Weekly promotions like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday, where they discount player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineups. So again, whether it's Drake May and his touchdowns or Jason Tatum and his scoring, you can even go across leagues, which is fun over there on PrizePicks. So go get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup with the code CLNS. That's code CLNS. You get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Just a couple more Philly questions here. Obviously, in this win and a good night for them, Paul George just doesn't look like Paul George still. And I don't know if it's the after effect of the couple injuries, knee bruises he suffered earlier this year. He felt pretty uninvolved overall in this game, and you did see he and Joel get into the 2-man game a couple times. But this was a pretty lackluster performance for George here in a season full of them. I think just 41% from the field, 33% from 3. The last 7-8 seasons before this, he's been a 20-point-per-game guy, and I think he's down to around 16. And that's concerning. I mean, this is just year 1 of a 5-year deal here. Not great.
Yeah, not great indeed. So I think he has missed quite a few open shots. I don't have the numbers in front of me of his numbers on like wide open looks, but it's like staggeringly low, which would indicate, those are going to go up and that'll help out a little bit. The biggest thing, and I wish I had the exact numbers in front of me, but I could certainly say for, watching every game and usually rewatching every game, he is very rarely shooting at the rim. He's finished at a good clip when he is at the rim, but so rarely is he getting downhill, like creating an advantage, beating a guy off the dribble and going all the way. And he's, one of the better shooters that has ever played the game, particularly in the last, 10, 15 years, and guys of, tall wings of that ilk. He's an incredible shooter, and he should seek out his own shots, both in spot up opportunities and off the dribble pull-ups, but they also need him to get downhill a little bit more. But even with that being said, he just hasn't been good enough as a scorer, and it's sort of outweighing the fact that he really is, as a passer, has been far better than I expected. As a rebounder, has been great. Defensive playmaker, has known where to be, really smart, gets his hands on basketballs quite a bit, gets a ton of deflections. But it all is sort of dragged down by the elephant in the room that, I think I just saw a comment about how it seemed like he disappeared from the game for quite a while. And that's something that a lot of, Clippers fans sort of complained about with him in recent years. I had noticed, and I get it. There are a lot of times where you sort of forget that he's there for a whole quarter, for most of a quarter. And part of the sort of appeal of Paul George is that he can play off the ball. And when you have Embiid and Maxey, having this guy who can hit all sorts of shots off the catch is great, and can still guard, can still rebound. That's, of course, wonderful. But there were stretches where the Sixers went with George as their sort of lone star in certain second unit lineups. And he just could not get going as a scorer. They're going to need more from him offensively to be the team that they want to be. They just do. And I think the biggest thing that sort of stands out as an opportunity is two-man actions with George and Joel. Maxey and Embiid have developed just a ridiculous two-man game. They have counters to counters. They can do it on all areas of the floor. They can do it for Maxey. They can do it for Embiid. They can do it at half court. They can do it at the 3-point line. They can do it inside. They can do it in between. They can do everything. And when the Sixers, when their lead went down to, I think, 6 with 2 minutes left after those Maxey turnovers, and Nurse called his second straight timeout, he came out of the timeout and he just went to a simple Maxey Embiid two-man game. Maxey in with pocket pass. Joel got to the rolled hard to the rim, drew a foul. That was actually the play where he twisted that other ankle, but I think he turned out to be okay. And he hit 2 free throws, and it really helped stabilize things. That's their bread and butter. That's the stuff that they need to go to in the most critical situations. I think for George, him being able to develop a similar sort of dynamic with Joel would be a really significant boost for him in this offense. Embiid, even when he's not his best self, even in the playoffs where, it's well documented that he hasn't always been his best, even against, guys like Horford who have always, famously defended him so well, at the very least, when he has the ball, 5 pairs of eyes are going to be on him from the opposing defense. And when he puts the ball on the floor, a double is almost certainly coming, no matter who he's sharing the floor with. So just having opportunities to be on the floor with Embiid will be a pretty significant crutch for George as he sort of tries to work his way out of this slump and find a more consistent offensive groove. But he's 34. He's going to be 35 in May. If the Sixers were to make a deep playoff run, he'll be 35 years old by the time that's going on. He's had a ton of injuries, including 2 bone bruises in the same knee this year already within a month of each other. He's not the same athlete that he once was. And I think the explosion off the dribble being diminished is probably the most significant sort of manifestation of that, because he just can't get downhill and draw a foul at the rim necessarily as easily as he once could during his days with the Clippers or Oklahoma City or of course, Indiana. That's something to look out for with George. But also some of these shooting numbers are just too low to make any sense and are clearly just, to some degree, he's the victim of variance here. So I would expect the shooting numbers to go up a decent bit in, the weeks, months to come. But there are some things approach-wise, particularly him going downhill, that have, or the lack thereof, that have concerned me. But again, I think more time with Embiid will do him a lot of good. But again, then it goes back to the question of when is Embiid going to play? Because how often is Embiid going to play? Because we don't know. We never know on a game-to-game basis. You just don't know, and that's part of. The question going in was, how is this team of a bunch of new players, where the Sixers were saying from the outset they're going to be super aggressive in resting Embiid and give him periodic time off? How is that team going to develop enough chemistry with each other on the floor that in April, May, or theoretically June, they're able to, win against teams like Boston, teams like Cleveland, Orlando, New York, your pick of the best teams in the East? So that's sort of my general outlook on Paul right now. Again, I think everything other than scoring has been terrific from him, which is really encouraging, because if he does, have one of these 3-week, 4-week shooting heaters, he's going to look like one of the better wings in the league again. It's just, is that coming? And if that comes, will it happen in conjunction with him keeping up all of the rebounding, passing, defensive stuff?
Yeah, and you do want him to be able to carry this thing if Embiid has to miss time, because that feels inevitable. That's a big reason he's here. It's what you relied on guys like Simmons and Harden to do in past situations, and that's his job now in some way, obviously sharing it with Maxey there. The last one I got on Philly for you is Yabusele, which isn't a massive story here in Boston. I remember talking to him in the preseason game, and it was cool. He got back in the league at that point, and the Olympic run was sensational. And that gets you back after all those years he missed being there at Real Madrid once Boston cut him. So pretty surprising he got back. That's a good story in itself, but playing every night, don't know if you expected that in the comeback, and playing well, uh, I think makes this a whole new dynamic here, especially between these two teams. And last night, I thought he did hurt the Celtics a couple of times early in the fourth quarter. It's a pretty deep bench unit out there, and he's logging minutes in a small ball look, and knocks down a couple of threes in this game on 4 tries, and overall just active. And that's what you expected as the Celtics when you drafted him. Was a guy who could play a couple positions, knock down threes, move his feet defensively despite being a massive body. It's amazing what he's doing right now for this team, and I don't know if he'll sustain, but as long as it does, if these teams do end up meeting down the line, I do think this story has the potential to grow here, because the Celtics caught him so long ago at this point, and the team's changed so much, and they've won the championship that it's hard to be like, oh, Yabu's killing in Philly. But he's killing in Philly.
He really is. It is truly a remarkable story. And you can just tell when you talk to him, even still now, months into the season, how much all of this means to him and how sort of surreal
He
it
didn't
is.
want to jinx it yesterday. I was like,
Yeah,
man, did you imagine he'd be playing this well? And he's like, we're only 30 games in.
yeah, exactly. I mean, he spent 5 years overseas trying to work his way back, and headed into the Olympics, like, had no perception that an NBA return this year was like even slightly on the table. And it really wasn't until just the extent to which he was brilliant in those Olympic games for Team France. Um and yeah, it's ironic. I actually talked to him about in November. He made his NBA debut in Philly, um, and he had his first NBA basket in Philly. I said, "Do you remember your first basket? Do you remember where it was?" He said, "Yeah, it was in Philly. I hit a pick and pop three from Shane Larkin." And I was like, "All right, so you remember?" I thought that was cool. Yabusele has been terrific. I wrote a story on Monday night that went up Tuesday morning after the Sixers played the Spurs, when Embiid got ejected at the end of the first half from that game. Nick Nurse just said, "We are mirroring Yabu's minutes with Wemby. He's going to be the guy on Wemby the rest of the
That was
game.
great.
He knows him." And Yabu was so good on both ends. He hit these crazy high arcing threes over Wemby. Attack a closeout with a pump fake, drive to the basket, score on him at the rim. Guarded him about as well as you could. Um, he's just, and Tyrese Maxey had a really excellent quote on it after that game. And I'm gonna just pull it up here and read it for you, because I just think it speaks to everything I would say. Tyrese said, "Yabu's been great. He's done so many different things. Played the 5, played the 4, started, come off the bench. He's done everything that the coaches have asked him to do. All you can do is appreciate someone like that, man. Shooting threes, rebounding, posting up. Sometimes we're going to throw him the ball in the post because he's a matchup problem down there. He knows how to score. His defense was amazing tonight." He's just thrived in every conceivable way, multiple positions. There was like almost no thought up on that Yabusele was going to play any center minutes for this team, let alone even whether he's going to get in the rotation at the 4. But whether or not he could play the 5 at all, nobody had any idea until literally their first preseason game, when he checked in for Andre Drummond in the first quarter. And it was like, wow, okay, they're trying Yabusele at center. And you could tell in training camp in the Bahamas that ironically, the people that guys talked about the most, and Nick Nurse talked about the most, were McCain and Yabusele as far as guys who impressed them. And that sort of ended up being telling. He's done everything. The most critical thing probably is the floor spacing. The 3-point volume is crazy high given expectations. He's shooting, I think,
It's come so far.
3.5 and 4 a game. Not playing 30 minutes every night, though he can some nights. Shooting, I think, close to 39%. He was well above 40 for most of the season, and then he had a little lull before these last 2 games where he's been excellent. He's great finishing around the rim. Everybody knows he's like a strongly built guy, and he knows how to leverage that to finish at the rim. He knows how to beat a guy off the dribble, like when he pump fakes and the guy tries to close out. really good passer for a big. Just does everything that they need, plays his butt off every second that he's in on both ends of the floor. There was a clip from that Spurs game where he hit a three and then just immediately took off sprinting in the other direction to pick up Wemby and, get in Wemby's grill to, try to prevent him from getting a touch. What he's done has really been astounding. Ironically, I tweeted this during the game last night. To me, he's the best backup center that the Sixers have had since Al Horford, which is sort of funny, and to the Celtics fans listening is very funny. If there are any Sixers fans listening, they think that's probably like more of a cursed sort of fact. But I think that they should view him, if they can keep him around long term, and it could get tricky with salary cap stuff depending on how much interest there is in him from other teams next summer. To me, this is the ideal backup center for them, and it's someone who can also play at the four alongside Joel if they need him to. It's a wonderful story. It's also heartwarming, and it just in the sense that it's very clear how much all of this means to him. The crowd in Philly absolutely loves him, and it's just the classic guy that a Philly crowd would love because he just plays so hard constantly, and they really gravitate towards that, and he feeds off of that in a way that I think is really special to watch. He's a great guy. Everybody who's been around him with the team and otherwise has really raved about him, including Nick Batum, who was on that team with Yabusele and Wembanyama, who gave him a glowing review of Philly before he signed. It's really I just cannot. I could go on for many more minutes about how brilliant of a story it is and how well he's played, and he's crushed everybody's expectations in every facet of his game, which is really remarkable. He is just a full-blown quality rotation NBA player, and to seemingly have no NBA prospects, 7 months ago, and now he's one of the most critical players in the rotation for a team that beat the defending champion Celtics on Christmas Day. It's a pretty cool story before you even get into the fact that he played for the Celtics.
Yeah.
I asked, I talked to him about the famous confetti game. Which Sixers fans remember even more than Celtics fans at this point. He was on the bench for that. So it's been a very interesting full circle moment for him that is incredibly deserved. And he's just a real player. It's not just a good story. It's a really good player who could help any team at two different positions. Any team would be thrilled to have him. And he's going to be an unrestricted free agent this summer. There are going to be teams calling. It's not going to be a thing where he waits until late July for one team to offer him a minimum. And by the way, he is paying a significant buyout to Real Madrid this year just to enable himself to get to Philly. He's essentially taking a pay cut to play for the Sixers because a bunch of the, $2.087 million veteran minimum that he's on, he's paying to Real Madrid because he really, it's a guy who really wanted to bet on himself that if he got back to the NBA, he could prove that he's a full-blown NBA player, and he really has. It's a wonderful story. It's a great find by the Sixers. Of course, everybody saw what he did in the Olympics, but it seems like the Sixers were by far the most interested team afterwards, and it's gone swimmingly for them. And if in a perfect world where Embiid stays healthy and George figures out how to score efficiently and consistently again, and Maxey finds his groove, that he keeps the groove that he's found the last handful of games, that's a tremendous player to be able to plug in at the 5, plug in at the 4, and high leverage situations if you need on either end of the floor, and he's fearless. It's really, just one of to me the better stories in the league this year, even during what's pretty much been a completely disastrous season for the Sixers otherwise.
Yeah, and matchup in Philadelphia coming up pretty quick, just about a month away, February 2nd, between these two teams. They still have 3 games left to play this year. So you want to go see those? You want to go see any game? Go check out the GameTime app. A couple of home games this weekend in Boston against the Pacers in East Finals matchup, or rematch rather. Go over there, check out The app, it's great. You always have these flash and zone deals going on. You get panoramic views of your seats, which is my favorite feature. And you can see exactly what you're paying upfront pricing. So nothing surprises you at the checkout. So go over there and use that code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase over in the GameTime app. Concerts, basketball, hockey going on right now, as well as football. Just a couple more weeks left in the NFL season. All of that and more at GameTime. And with the code CLNS, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So let's talk a little Celtics. I'm down on them right now, not in a big way, because I do think many of their issues right now, and it's recent, we're talking about the last 5-10 games here where they've started to slow it down a little bit. I think health is a problem right now for them, and it's not that guys are missing, it's that they have all these bumps and bruises and guys are moving in and out of the lineup, and especially Porzingis, who went down for a third time in 11 games since he's been back from off-season surgery. His sparse availability, and you got to manage him and all that too, I think has been a pressure point on them too. And Holiday's banged up. I don't know how far back that goes, but it's impacted his play. Sam Hauser has this reoccurring back thing going on. So he hasn't been the same guy this year. And all of a sudden, this team that shot 38% last year, which pretty much led the league, and certainly from a volume standpoint, they were getting more points from threes than anyone, is down to 16th. They're just like 36.5% from three this year. And they had it in this game and still weren't good enough defensively to be able to close it out because Philly pretty much matched them with 17 threes of their own. So some weird games. I think there's some matchups that hurt them more than others, and that does become interesting come playoff time because not to do the whole, they had the easiest run, everything, but they didn't see certain teams that I think could have put more pressure on them than the teams that they did were able to there. So I think my general feeling on them right now, and I want to get your thoughts, Adam, is they're not unstoppable. And they felt inevitable at the start of this year as the threes were pouring down and Tatum got off to this crazy start and Pritchard and some other guys were rolling. White looked like an all-star early on too. But when the three-pointer slows down for them, they become a little more human and have to rely on some other things that I think that they can get to, whether it's Tatum getting downhill or defensive dominance or offensive rebounding. You saw a little bit of that in this game too here to be able to try to pull it out late. But I don't love the way they're playing right now, and it does mildly concern me.
Yeah, so I largely agree. I obviously do not follow all things Celtics in as intensive a way as you. They're probably the team that I watch more than any non-Sixers team in the NBA for what it's worth. What I will say is that last season, like you used the word inevitable, when I watched the Celtics, there was just, no matter who they were playing, there was just a sense of like, the Celtics are so much better than the team they were playing against right now. And it is like almost unfathomable to me that they could lose the game. And I don't feel that way nearly as much watching them. Now, I still think they're awesome. If I had to pick right now which team wins the title, I would still pick the Celtics, even though I mean, everybody's high on the Oklahoma City Thunder. That's not like a outlandish take for me, but particularly if they get Chet Holmgren back, I think that's probably the team I would have, number two. But this is still, a brilliantly constructed team. And I think there's reason to hope that guys like, Jalen and Drew and Porzingis will, their 3-point percentages will go up. And, Hauser is such a awesome weapon to have off your bench. And if he can, whatever this back stuff is, which does seem like it's been pretty weird and like it's been going on for a little while now. If he can get back to the Hauser that he's known to be, just having the floor of a guy who's going to shoot so many threes and make a considerable, percentage of them is just such an instant lift. But I do agree. Some of the defensive stuff has been weird. I think I saw you post about this, that, that breakdown they had on that out of bounds play.
Unbelievable.
I could not, the Sixers have run that a few times recently and never has the entire paint just been wide open for Tyrese. I could not believe it. And then he almost fumbled the ball and I think almost hurt his knee on that play too, but he got it to go. But that's the sort of breakdown that I'm just not used to seeing from the Celtics. And you could speak better to me whether or not that's sort of emblematic of a larger theme going on with them. But yeah, you use the word inevitable describing like last year's team, and I would have also used that word, and it doesn't feel that way right now. But it's December, and they're still 22-8, so they're doing all right. Obviously, the amount of talent is incredible. I was very appreciative that you teamed up with me on that game preview for Philly Voice yesterday, and the first guy I wanted to ask you about was Pritchard, because I've just been so fascinated by how massive of a weapon he's become. And I know he's, I think the last 3 games have been pretty rough for him shooting wise, and I think 0 for 8 from 3 yesterday against the Sixers.
That was a weird one, yeah.
Yeah, but another guy that there's just such a, like, of course, every guy is liable to a game where they go 0 for, but generally speaking, such a high floor when you're shooting so many threes and you're such a good shooter. And I know there's this whole like widespread thing about, are people shooting too many threes? The Celtics, like, if there's any team that should be shooting 1 billion threes a game, it's a team that has 1 billion good 3-point shooters. Like that is sort of nonsensical to me. But you, like you said, you always want to be able to win in multiple ways. You don't want to be as good of a shooting team as they are. You don't want to be entirely reliant on shots going down and then not be able to pivot if they're not, and you're in trouble and you need to go to something else. But clearly they're in good hands, both in terms of, Mazzulla and his staff do a wonderful job, and the front office is, of course, brilliant. And I know for all sorts of reasons, between prior trades and second apron stuff, they're extremely limited in what they can do in terms of adding to this. But even look at something small last year, like adding Xavier Tillman. It was just like such a classic Celtics addition to me.
Yeah.
It's very funny to me how like the Sixers have been searching for a backup center for what feels like 25 years, and Celtics just have 4 of them right now. And I enjoy, like, you'll either turn on a game or click on a Celtics box score. It's like, oh, tonight it's Kada. Oh, tonight it's Cornette. Like, you never know who it's going to be. I enjoy that. I struggle to be too concerned. Like I suppose some concern relative to what I expected from them, but still 22-8, still, one of the best offenses in the league, I believe, and one of the best defenses in the league. It's still an awesome team. They have more than enough time to figure it out. And I'm sure, I'm sure during the games it drives Mazzulla nuts, but knowing him, I'm sure he also sort of enjoys the fact that there's stuff that he can hammer home over the next few months, and they don't feel like they can coast. And it doesn't seem like a group that really feels that way anyways. It's a bunch of pretty motivated guys, and that's why they all play so well for Mazzulla. But yeah, I would echo like the concerns that you just spoke to, and I think they're concerns, but in the grand scheme of things, there are 29 teams with far more significant ones.
Yeah. And I think there's only a small number of teams that could beat them 4 times. I do put the Thunder in that category. Several of them are probably out west, and it'll be interesting to watch them against more West teams as those come about. Memphis played them great. I think Milwaukee can still play them athletically through Giannis in a challenging way. And Philadelphia, I have some positives from this game too. I like how they can generate threes over Embiid's drop. I like how they can put Embiid in space, with Jalen and make him work. And Jalen, after an awful start to this game, turned it around by attacking mismatches. So they're pretty versatile offensively in the way that they can create threes. And you saw it in this game. The paint's not always super accessible against Philadelphia and Embiid. And when you can rain down jump shots over that, that's important. And they did that in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that is like the true stretch fives are some of the, for Embiid's
Horford was plus 22 in this game, I think.
Right. Those have been the guys who have been the most difficult for him to handle, because he is just naturally inclined to want to protect the rim because he is so unbelievably good around the rim.
I'm just seeing Horford shot 5 of 10 from 3 in this game.
Right. I mean, I can think of I can think all the way back to 2018 and Al Horford picking and popping him to death with Terry Rozier and like Aaron Baines hitting corner threes. Like it's still like that was a thing then, and 6-7 years later, it's still a thing. He's better than people realize a lot of time in space defending Embiid, that is. But Porzingis and Horford are such unique floor spacing threats, like particularly Porzingis and how far he shoots it from. And when I was not at TD Garden yesterday, but so I was watching on TV, and when the second half started, and I noticed Cornette was in there over Porzingis. Like Cornette is a very good backup center, and frankly, the Sixers would have killed to have Luke Cornette the last few years, but just the fact that it's someone who has to hang around the rim means that Joel can also hang around the rim, and that's where he's his most comfortable. That's as far as the Sixers defense, my absolute number one concern in a 7-game series against the Celtics is how they manufacture sort of opportunities for Embiid to hang around the rim. And I don't know if that means going to a bunch of zone or just pre-switching as much as you can, or even like trying to throw him on Jalen occasionally just to see what it looks like, which like sort of sounds crazy and probably is a little bit crazy, but Nick Nurse has done plenty of crazy things as a guy who threw a box and one at Steph Curry in the finals. I think the spatial issue for Joel defensively is probably the most significant thing that the Sixers would run into as a defense against the Celtics in a series, just because Horford and Porzingis are so like, these are not just bigs who can shoot. These are like awesome shooters who happen to be bigs.
Yeah.
Particularly Porzingis. And he's doing it from 30 feet out most of the time. Guys who can space that far, it's just an archetype that has given him trouble forever. And whenever the Sixers have played those stretch fives, they often will invert the 4-5 matchup. So whoever their 4 is will guard the stretch big, and Embiid will guard like the power forward who's not as good of a shooter. But no such player exists on the Celtics. Like, it's not like when they used to play the Pacers and they put Ben Simmons on Miles Turner so Embiid could roam off of Thaddeus Young. There's no such matchup with Boston. That's really the biggest thing, unless they want to try it with Drew, which I suppose you could, but I don't know how well it's going to work.
Grizzlies did it successfully. I don't know how many teams could. Philly maybe. He didn't play in this game, but it's challenging because he has the pedigree of a great shooter, even if it hasn't gone that way this year. But that is going to be one of the big swing factors in whether they get it done again this year or not, is whether he can turn it around, whether Porzingis is consistently available, and Horford lets you get by as he did for most of last postseason if he's still playing at the level that he has for the last handful of years here. So that's stymies that concern. And then Brown and Tatum are just both so good at this point that they've been able to win in a bunch of different lineups with those guys. So I think that puts you in a good spot. It doesn't feel like there's too many teams that could beat this group 4 times. But they have to get right. And these next 7 games will tell us a lot about them, with the Pacers coming up twice, a team that probably played them about as tough as anyone last year. Toronto, who took them to overtime earlier this season, as bad as they've been. And then this monster road trip against Minnesota, Houston back-to-back, Oklahoma City, and then Denver, which is probably the hardest road trip I've ever seen.
Yeah, that is sort of unbelievable to me, actually. That is a ridiculous stretch. The Sixers have like Utah, Portland, Sacramento coming up, so they're in the total, and then they return to the East Coast and go to Brooklyn, so they're in the opposite boat right now. But yeah,
I'm excited because the Celtics have been playing the Wizards and Pistons and those kind of teams to this point so far. Nets a couple times, so it's about time they get some real tests here, and they need it right now, clearly, because there's a chance that all this stuff could just be boredom or malaise coming off the summer championship, all that. It probably is hard to reset and go back to playing regular season games after winning a title and doing everything that they did over the summer, Olympics included. So this stretch, clearly a wake-up call for them, and we'll see how they handle the next 7 games here. But the Pacers are coming up tomorrow night. We'll have coverage of that here on the Garden Report. Looking forward to seeing you in Philly in about a month, Adam, and you can check out all of his work and coverage over at Philly Voice, where he's been working for a little while now. Appreciate you, Adam. We did a piece together over there as well you can check out, and we'll talk to you again in February, man.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much.